There's much to talk about. Let's get to our panel. Alan Wager is a research associate with the UK in a Changing Europe initiative at King's College London. Also from London, Robert Oulds serves as the director of the Bruges Group, a conservative public policy research firm. Klaus Larres is a distinguished professor of history and international affairs at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And also with us is my colleague, CGTN's White House correspondent, Nathan King, right here with me in the studio. And it's with Nathan that we start. Nathan, this is a complex issue, to say the least. Let's step back a bit. The British people voted in 2016 to leave the European Union, but how the country actually leaves, the terms of its departure, its divorce settlement, if you like, that's what's causing the problems right now. What are the outlines of what happened in Parliament today politically for Boris Johnson? Well,
quite incredibly, you're absolutely right. Over 3 years ago, remember Boris on the bus saying £350 million a week back into the NHS. He was one of the big Leave campaigners, along with a lot of his front bench right now. But essentially, he's taking over for what Theresa May failed to do. As Richard said, 3 times they did not get a deal worked out with the European Union through, largely because of the Irish backstop problem, i.e. is there going to be a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, but other issues too. And this is Boris Johnson, the new Prime Minister's attempt to try and break the logjam. Remember, the Conservative Party are divided, the Labour Party is divided, the country is divided. Well, how do you push this through? And he's basically said, we are going to prepare for a no-deal Brexit on October the 31st. If we can't get that, but while I'm trying to get some sort of deal, some sort of change in the deal, but Parliament needs to go along and cannot tie my hands, if you like. And basically, Parliament doesn't trust him. They think he's planning to crash out of the European Union without a deal on October the 31st, and this is why they're trying to stop him.
Robert Oulds, Boris Johnson has taken a number of actions to get his way, some of them unprecedented. He's slashed the time Parliament can debate the terms of Brexit. It's known as proroguing Parliament. That's a new word that's entered our political lexicon in the last few days. Now, many have called that undemocratic. It's bypassing the will of the people. Question is, why restrict debate? What is he afraid of?
Well, debate hasn't been restricted, as you can see, that Parliament is actually sitting and will be sitting again from the middle of October. It is traditional in British politics that at this time of year, from the middle of September until early mid-October, Parliament is in what's known as recess. There isn't actually a Parliament going to be sitting during the weeks coming ahead. So there is actually no restricting of debate, and the debate is actually very lively in the House of Commons, and Boris Johnson's actually fully engaged with that, as we have seen.
Alan Wager, what do you make of Boris Johnson's actions so far?
Well, the decision to prorogue was unprecedented in many ways, and it has created this backlash from Conservative MPs and these 21 MPs who have voted against him tonight. The big question actually is whether or not he wanted this reaction, whether he's trying to provoke MPs into a sort of people versus Parliament election in which he stands on one side and these MPs and the Labour Party, who he says are trying to block Brexit, on the other side. So the big question is whether or not this is actually all that bad for Boris Johnson tonight. You know, losing these 21 MPs on face value is really bad, but it's whether or not he can try and frame this as some sort of political win for himself and try and push towards an election in which he can argue that unless he gets a mandate, a majority from the people, Brexit won't happen.
It's a great point, Nathan, that Alan raises there. Is Boris Johnson going to be surprised by what happened in Parliament today, or is this part of the plan?
Well, I mean, as far as any plan is, because, you know, things change very quickly, but essentially here, there's a timetable. And it's very, very tight. And the key date everyone needs to bear in mind is October the 17th. That is when Boris Johnson, if he's still Prime Minister, would go to Europe and basically have a last chance to get some sort of deal that he could then sell to Parliament, or at least push through and therefore avoid a hard Brexit, a no-deal Brexit. Now, the theory is this proroguing which essentially suspends Parliament, but actually you can't bring parliamentary business, whereas under the old system where people go to the party conferences, you could actually bring up parliamentary business. So it's not just cutting the number of days they could debate, but actually cutting off debate for a long time. That's why Parliament is reacting as they are now, because they don't think there will be enough time between October, after the summit in October the 17th, to October the 31st, which is when the UK will drop out. Now, the point generally about all this parliamentary business is essentially, can the new government get its way? We have learned that they've fallen at their first hurdle. This is the first time a new Prime Minister has lost a vote, his first vote in the House of Commons since the 19th century. The question is, what happens tomorrow? We heard that he's going to say he wants an election. Can he get that through? Because remember, with fixed-term parliaments, you essentially need a two-thirds majority of Parliament. Now, there is a way around that with a simple majority, but as we've seen, he doesn't have a majority, so he may not even be able to get an election through. So all this is up in the air, but you can see a plan, can't you? Which is create the outrage, create the election, and he hopes, and this is what's really interesting, that an election against Jeremy Corbyn, deeply unpopular in the country and part of his party, it becomes a beauty contest between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn, not a let's stay in the European Union or let's leave, as other people want in a second referendum. And he hopes to build some sort of majority, which is much better than the minority government he is in here. I know it's complicated, but essentially that is the plan.
Okay. Klaus Larres, of course, this is new territory here. The important part of the bill here that the rebel MPs want is that it will require Britain to seek a Brexit delay beyond October 31st. But can the European Union say, no way, that's your bill, that's a domestic matter, it's got nothing to do with us, it will have no effect on Brussels, we're sticking to October 31st, that's it?
Yeah, in theory they could, of course. But if the Prime Minister went to Brussels and asked for an extension, for another extension, be it 3 months or be it longer, then the EU is unlikely to say no, because that would really be bad. You know, the EU wants to get some sort of deal going. They hope that the withdrawal agreement, which Mrs. May negotiated, may eventually still get through, and they want to give it all opportunities. And therefore, you know, to say no, that we are not going to extend it beyond the 31st of October is highly unlikely. Whether they will only extend it by 3 months, that is very much the question. I would say they will at least insist on 6 months, even longer, to give it more of a chance in the British Parliament that that withdrawal agreement still comes through. What I find a little surprising is what the previous speaker said, that it's all part of a plan. I don't think that any Prime Minister wants to lose 21 Conservative MPs and has a big strategy which includes that. I think it was a huge disaster for Boris Johnson. His prime ministership is very much on the line. He may not be prime minister much longer.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's no, but I think the drain the swamp line is absolutely right here. Is that basically he knew these rebels were there. Theresa May had the same problem with the rebels. If you have this vote, you lose 20 people. You can replace them in an election with people who will do your bidding.
But why then threaten them with losing the Conservative whip? Why do all sorts of things which make him look really bad? Well, I think Boris Johnson wants to have a general election. I agree with that.
Strong and after providing decisive leadership and delivering on the public will of the referendum and the general election of 2017, when every single Conservative MP, including the 21 who have now had the whip withdrawn, and every single Labour MP was elected on the manifesto commitment of respecting the referendum and taking us out of the European Union. This is only bringing into force what indeed Parliament has actually voted for, which was the European Union Notification Withdrawal Act and the European Union Withdrawal Act. The express will of Parliament, as it stands at the moment, is that we leave the European Union and honour the referendum result. Boris Johnson, by providing decisive leadership and indeed working towards his plan of pushing us towards a general election where he can have a majority government
may I just
to push his Conservative agenda. Excuse me, I haven't finished. If you'll allow me to finish rather than interrupt. I didn't interrupt you when you were speaking. Do me the courtesy of not interrupting me. Boris Johnson is just providing the leadership, which is delivering on the democratic result of the referendum and the previous election, and making sure that MPs honour their manifesto commitments, which is their agreement between themselves and their electors, the people that have put them there in the first place. This is fundamental for our democracy. If we are to call ourselves a democracy, we need to respect the vote that people have.
Klaus, I will get to you in a moment. Alan, I know you want to say something. Go ahead.
The big problem with this strategy and that line of argument is that if Boris Johnson fails to get the UK to leave the European Union by 31st of October, and he said that it was do or die that the UK would leave the EU on the 31st of October, then there's Nigel Farage lurking in the background there to split the pro-Brexit vote and be a thorn in the side of Boris Johnson.
Okay.
So that's going to be a huge problem for Nigel.
He has no
Boris
choice.
Johnson. Okay.
Well, and that's what, absolutely. You're correct.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Klaus, go ahead.
But that's why. Yeah.
If I may say so, I think the referendum result is being distorted here. 52% of the British people decided that they wanted to leave the EU. They did not decide they wanted to leave the EU without a deal, the so-called hard Brexit. And we should not simply say that is what
they wanted to leave the European Union.
One moment, Robert. Let Klaus
Staying in the European Union is not respecting the referendum result.
That's
quite clear.
True.
I thought even you can see that logic.
All right, one at a time, please. Klaus, finish what you were saying.
They voted to leave. It was made quite clear by the British Prime Minister, David Cameron,
Robert, just
that leaving the European Union would also be leaving the institutions of the European Union, not still governed by the European Union.
Okay, just let Klaus finish. I will get you. Klaus, go ahead.
This is typical for the Brexiteers. They like to raise their voice, but it still doesn't become more true what they are saying. 52% of the British people wanted to leave the EU, but they didn't want to leave with a hard Brexit.
Parliament legislated
but they did not want a hard Brexit. And the people of Scotland and Northern Ireland, in their majority, didn't want to leave at all.
Yeah, okay. Can I just say something? This
the UK had a referendum, and the majority of the UK that took part in the vote voted to leave.
Robert, you've got to allow the other people to speak.
80% of MPs were voted to leave. You're saying that this isn't true is actually misleading because the facts are quite
you've
simple.
Got to let the others
we voted to leave. We were told that we were leaving, and that the result would be implemented by the previous government and by the government elected after the 2017
Nathan
general
wants
election.
to speak now. Go ahead,
and the House
Nathan.
of Commons voted for this.
Go ahead, Nathan.
Oh, hang on, he's just stopped. Great.
Right.
This is fascinating because this is really where this comes down to. And Britain, the UK does not have a written constitution. So the question is, where does sovereignty lie? And we just heard from the Bruges Group there, where essentially, and they make a very compelling argument, that over 17 million people, a majority, voted to leave, and 3 years later haven't left. Is the people sovereign? Or is it Parliament, as the representatives of the people, that can say, okay, that was the referendum, but how do we get out? Oh dear, it's going to be a bit difficult, a lot more difficult than people say, and it's up to them. And we are seeing this battle right here.
And what the new Prime Minister
just one moment,
and the new Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is hoping that the people's will essentially will drive him through this process, including a general election. What's really interesting is that the Conservative Party is based on a tradition of Burkeanism, where especially, the representatives in Parliament can change their mind. They're not just the delegates of their people. They can change their mind if things are in the best interest of the country. And what we're seeing is that huge tussle, not just in the Tory party, but in Labour as well. So it's fascinating.
Those are big questions. But Alan Wager, let me get to you on another point. These rebel MPs and part of the Labour Party, they want this extension. They want a renegotiation. But they've not told us what they want in that renegotiation, because so far Parliament has rejected, 3 times?
3 times.
The deal that's on the table right now. So, and the European Union has made it clear that they do not want to change that. So what are they voting on if they don't know what they want?
They don't know what they want, and it's almost inevitable that there'll be a general election between now and the end of January. And do these MPs really want a Jeremy Corbyn government, is the question that is being asked of these Conservative MPs. And that's why a lot of them are finding their position pretty untenable at the moment, because actually, ultimately, what do they want? They want a situation where the majority of them can pass a deal with the European Union. That looks pretty much impossible. The Labour government, any Conservative government wouldn't be able to pass any withdrawal agreement without either a referendum or going for no deal. So a lot of these MPs, who the majority of whom say they want to have a deal with the EU that's similar to Theresa May's deal, I think that's long gone. It's almost impossible that they will get what they want ultimately.
Klaus Larres,
So it's really hard to know.
Klaus Larres, is there any indication, any appetite at all in Brussels to change the deal that's there right now?
Well, there are certain movements. I think the EU privately says what is happening in the UK right now is a domestic matter, has nothing to do with the EU. But in fact, they are really furious that the Johnson government hasn't produced a proper alternative to the backstop. They are still waiting for a good new proposal which needs to be discussed. David Frost, Johnson's emissary, is regularly traveling to Brussels. He is having conversations, but proposals have not been put on the table. But what is perhaps a possibility is that there is a way back to the first agreement that the backstop will only apply to Northern Ireland rather than to the rest of the UK. And Johnson is traveling to Dublin on Monday to meet with the Irish Prime Minister, and they're talking about a so-called agri-food unity, which would really mean that in terms of agriculture, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland will be under the same rules. And that may actually indicate that the backstop just limited to Northern Ireland might be the compromise solution which will be pushed through, which would probably be acceptable to the EU, and it might also be acceptable to the Unionists and to the Johnson government at large. So I think there is a little bit of hope, but Johnson really needs to table these proposals properly and formally, rather than claiming that he has tabled proposals, which so far he has not actually done. And the EU is getting rather frustrated that that hasn't been done.
Okay, Robert, we're hearing all kinds of very dire warnings, ominous warnings about a no-deal Brexit. And we heard this warning from Jeremy Corbyn, the opposition Labour leader. Let's listen to this.
No deal, Mr. Speaker, will mean food shortages, reduced medical supplies and chaos at our ports. Not me saying that. The government's own leaked analysis says, and it warns of chaos all across the board. Today, we had expected a publication of the government's no-deal preparations. This government is hiding from scrutiny, hiding from the people, and trying to hide us from their true intentions. This isn't just a government in chaos, but a government of cowardice.
So, Robert, does Jeremy Corbyn have a point there?
Well, actually, there's no such thing as no deal. If Britain leaves the European Union on the 31st of October, it either leaves with the withdrawal agreement being put into force, which essentially keeps us tied to the European Union for a transitional period, which, of course, may indeed be extended as of the political declarations. Yeah, but
what if he doesn't sign the deal?
We leave without the withdrawal agreement. Well, or we leave without the withdrawal agreement, which means that other deals then kick in. Contingency measures that the European Union has put in place aren't as comprehensive as the withdrawal agreement, but indeed cover most aspects of trade, would allow to keep trade open, keep flights continuing, keep the trade flowing between the countries, access for the City of London to the financial markets of the European Union. Of course, it doesn't deal comprehensively like the withdrawal agreement does, but it is enough. So there's actually no such thing as no deal. This is just a sort of rhetoric that's used, deal or no deal. Okay. It's a popular phrase within the United Kingdom, but there is no such thing. And so these scare stories, these bogus arguments that are continually proved untrue about cliff edges, all that. It's just rhetoric used by those that want to keep us in the European Union. But there is no such thing. Other international agreements that would also apply.
That's just doesn't hold up.
Are these
that doesn't hold up because basically
that is a matter of fact. This is about the European Union's contingency measures they put in place.
Robert,
the European Union has done this.
Okay, Robert, go ahead, Nathan.
So a lot of the trading relationship, if you
read the European Union documents, Robert, they're online. This is not a secret.
All right, you've got to give a chance for the other people to speak.
Your other guests
are ill-informed. To give us a chance.
They're ill-informed. They do not recognise that the contingency measures put in place by the European Union will apply.
Go ahead.
All right. Is he finished?
He's finished. You have the floor. Go ahead.
So he's right in one respect, that everything wouldn't come crashing to a halt.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Can I? There's a big but.
Yeah, I'm right. I was right.
Well, no. You see, this is why people get really annoyed. All right, because
This is why. This is the problem with the debate. We have people who are committed to remain that are willing to mislead
Robert,
the
you
public
have to
and try and scare them.
We're going to have to cut your mic off. You're going to have to give people a chance to say something.
The mother of all parliaments, you know, English debating, where's it gone?
Yeah.
Anyway, he's right in one respect that everything wouldn't come crashing to a halt, but a lot of trading relationships are not in place, so it will revert to a lot of WTO rules. The average tariff, for example, of EU members is about 3%. You know, it would jump much higher. And if you look at the representatives of British industry, the Haulage Association, the Retail Federation, people who import food, the grocers, they're all warning that there are going to be problems.
Unlimited
shortages of
access for
medicine too.
Why don't you base your arguments in fact?
Just one moment, Robert.
Unlimited access for haulage.
These are the professional associations that have been doing business for decades with the EU. They know all the rules and they know what's coming. Yeah. Now, you can listen to the head of this Bruges Group guy who basically says, I'm right, or you can listen to professionals. The trouble is the death of expertise. Okay, they feel sometimes that they could come out and shout people down, like we're hearing right now, but actually not listen to people who are in an area of expertise because they happen to disagree with them. Okay. There is a difference between opinion and fact.
For haulage. This is part of the European Union's proposals.
All right. I'm going to go to Alan. Alan, just one more point I want to raise, and that is, what are the prospects of a second referendum?
I don't care if I've been warned or not.
The prospects of a second referendum depend on the result of an election. It won't happen before an election, but we've got to remember that the Labour Party, the Scottish Nationalist Party, the Liberal Democrats, all now are going to be campaigning for a referendum. So we're one election away from there being a referendum. So, I mean, if you were a Remain voter, Remain supporter the day after the referendum 3 years ago, would you have taken that? Yes, you probably would have taken the fact that 3 years later, you know, people like Richard are very angry because we haven't left, but we haven't left, and there's still a very live possibility there could be a further vote. I mean, the movement towards no deal increases the chance of a further vote because there just really isn't the democratic mandate for the level of economic and social disruption that would come from a no deal.
Right. Okay, I'm sorry, we have run out of time. We are going to have to go. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.